Dr. Schwell, I think the most common reason I've heard for people choosing not to get the vaccine is that they feel like the process may have been rushed, that there isn't enough long-term data yet. They may be willing to get the vaccine at some point, but they will look at the historical timelines for vaccines and realize that it takes often 10 years, maybe the average for a vaccine to actually be manufactured and go through the authorization and approval process. So what are your thoughts about this sentiment? And, do you feel like the vaccine was rushed? Do you feel like we can trust the process in this case with this particular technology?
That's a great question. So there's no question in my mind and anyone else's that this process was accelerated. No question about it. The question is was the quality of the product compromised by the acceleration of the process? And here you can see on the screen a typical vaccine timeline. If this was done under normal situations, we would have started in 2020, and we wouldn't have had a product until 2034. And the reason for that is because there is risk in making these vaccines, but there's also processes that they have to go through. So there is the research that has to happen. Then there's the preclinical trials, the benchtop trials, and then phase 1 to figure out the right dose, phase 2 to do the small randomized controlled trials to see if there are problems. And then finally, the big phase 3 trials leading up to building the factories to make these vaccines, and then the manufacturing, and then the approval process, and then finally the distribution. So what you can see in the lower portion of that screen is everything got compressed. Now, notice that nothing got skipped. So we still had the phase 1 trials and the phase 2 and the phase 3. Some of these were being run concomitantly, which means at the same time. But notice something very interesting. The factories were being built at the same time that the phase 1 and 2 trials were being done. And why is that? Why were they able to do that? What the government did by stepping in and providing them money and resources and providing those barriers is they're saying, look, we'll give you the money to build the factories, realizing that if these phase 1, 2, and 3 trials are a bust, you're not going to be held liable for the amount of money that you've spent in building these factories that aren't going to do anything. And so that was one of the major barriers to getting this thing done, was the risk that the companies would not normally be willing to take on these vaccines. But the government was saying, we don't want you to take that risk. We want you to get those things started. Now, this sort of thing has happened before. If we go back to World War II and we talk about the Nazis in World War II and the tremendous machinery that they had and the war machine of the Nazis, what happened was Franklin Delano Roosevelt sat down with a guy by the name of William Knudsen, who was basically the most powerful man in terms of Detroit and the auto manufacturing process. And he basically offered him a salary of $1 to basically coordinate the infrastructure plan to build the war machine that he would be able to go against Hitler. This is what William Knudsen, the president of General Motors, said in a meeting of the executives. He said, the first half of 1941 is crucial. He said, gentlemen, we must outbuild Hitler. And that's exactly what he did. There was a point in time in Detroit where they were at the Ford manufacturing plant putting out a B-24 Liberator, which is a large plane with 4 engines, at the rate of 1 per hour. That was because the entire infrastructure of the United States was turned towards one goal, and that was defeating Hitler in World War II. And the same thing happened with the implementation of the project of coming forth with a vaccine. Now, some of the vaccine companies took advantage of the funds, others did not. But the bottom line is that those barriers that created a lag time because of risk, because of money, those sorts of things were completely eliminated, and they were able to speed up the production of the vaccine. Now, the phase 1 trial still happened. The animal studies still happened. No, the animals did not die in the production of the. In fact, it was because the animals did so well that they were able to go to phase 1, 2, and 3. The other aspect of this that is tossed around is that this is new technology. Now, I know that Dr. Patrick knows more about the technology in terms of the history, but I will just give you a very short timeline. Back in the 1990s, we injected for the first time mRNA into the muscle cells of a mouse for the very first time. By 2005, we had modified the nucleotides, which are the signaling in that mRNA vaccine, to get around early destruction. So the problem early on was that we couldn't allow these messenger RNA molecules to last long enough to make the protein product. The problem wasn't that they lasted forever. It was that they didn't last long enough. But they were able to finally figure out how to do that. And by 2013, they started working on medications that were based on mRNA. And then finally, we had the vaccines. Here is a paper that was published in 1990, so over 30 years ago, that was for the first time showing that this technology actually had viability. And so this technology is not new. It's been around for 30 years, and it's been looked at. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Patrick. I think she has some more details on this.
Yes, I do. Well, in addition to this technology not being new in the sense that most people think this is the first time it's actually been used in humans, just to kind of speak to your point about the acceleration of the process of getting this vaccine into people, and you were talking about all the money that's available for building the factories. I think another really important thing to point out is the difference between this vaccine and our history of vaccines in terms of how we make them. For the mRNA vaccines, all you need is the sequence. That's all you need to make it. And it's so easy to make in mass quantities versus having to actually grow vaccine in some kind of animal cell type. And you're limited. There's a limitation in how much of it you can make, physically limitation. So just going back to the actual history of mRNA vaccines and this mRNA technology in humans, in 2001, we have the first clinical trial of this mRNA technology that was made. It was mRNA induced dendritic cells. In 2009, we have another clinical trial where mRNA was used as a therapeutic. In 2014, there's the first mRNA vaccine in terms of immunotherapy for cancer. So trying to treat cancer with mRNA vaccines. These are all in humans. In 2017, there were two clinical trials, one for mRNA-based vaccine for influenza, and another one for mRNA technology used to treat patients with basically had heart failure, and they were injecting mRNA vaccines into their heart. So we've got a lot of clinical data dating back to 2001 where we've been using this technology in humans, so this is not the new technology that people in their minds, they think that this is the first time it's ever been used in humans and how scary that is. I mean, so again, it dates back to decades, couple of decades being used in humans. It just to kind of add to that, I really, moving forward, it's amazing how this field has exploded in terms of all the clinical trials now being started and planned for this mRNA technology. There's so much interest and there's a lot of funding now to understand this technology as a therapeutic for infectious diseases, in addition to the SARS-CoV-2 virus for other ones. There are now clinical studies that are now starting to look at this technology to treat genetic disorders like muscular dystrophy, where there's no treatment that exists. Can you imagine being the parent of a son that has muscular dystrophy and knowing there's no treatment and having to watch your son degenerate and die? I mean, we may see a treatment for muscular dystrophy in our lifetime because of this. It's accelerated and exploded this clinical arena. We're now seeing tons and tons of trials for mRNA vaccines as immunotherapy for cancers, where they're going to be injecting this mRNA technology into a variety of different types of solid tumors. And again, we may very well in our lifetime now see a cure for different types of solid tumors. Solid tumors are the type of cancers that are hardest to treat with chemotherapy because they often grow far away from blood vessels. And so blood vessels, you need them to be close to the cancer site, because that's where how the chemotherapeutic gets delivered to the tumor site. And so you'll get these tumors growing far away from them. They're what's called hypoxic. They're growing far away from blood vessels. And so it's one of the reasons why many different solid tumors are resistant to many types of chemotherapeutic treatments. So imagine being able to directly inject the tumor with this mRNA technology, where we're going to, test a variety of different immune generating, molecules and things that are going to activate the immune system to go right directly to that tumor and kill it. It's a very exciting time, and I understand that people are scared because it's new to them, and it's always scary when something is new and there's change. But there's a bright side, and that bright side is that science is moving forward at an accelerated rate, and we are witnessing something that is, that would have not have happened otherwise without this terrible pandemic that obviously a lot of bad has come out of. But, to try to see the silver lining here, the good out of it is that the science is really catapulted forward, and there's some exciting stuff going on with the mRNA technology.
Thank you for that. Definitely good to have some silver linings right now. And before we sign off, any items that we didn't cover that you want to?
I was just going to say this, Kyle, is to keep in mind this image I've got here on the screen, and that is the UK's second wave, which was non-Delta, and then the third wave, which was Delta. And I want the audience to keep this in mind when it comes to vaccines and what they can potentially do. In the second wave, which is in red, the left half of that shows how quickly the infections rose as time went on. And concomitantly, on the other side of it, on the right side, you can see how quickly deaths, unfortunately, also rose in that second wave. And that's without the vaccines that we currently have now. And then the third wave came, which was Delta wave. And what you can see there, which is a stark departure from the wave on the left, is that while you had the increasing amount of infections, which are basically positive PCRs, as we've talked about, what's missing there from that is the increased amount of deaths in that third wave. And that is with the vaccine. And that's something to keep in mind that I really want to make sure the audience understands, is when you hear news stories talking about the decreased effectiveness of the vaccine, make sure that you understand that they're talking about their ability to prevent infections. But what they're not talking about, at least up to this point in time, and with the Delta variant, is that we're still holding on its ability to prevent hospitalizations and deaths. Now, there is some data that is coming out of Israel where at least some experts believe that that ability to hold may be waning in the most elderly and in those that have been vaccinated the longest. And that's where we're talking about booster shots and things of that nature. I think that data, as we're talking right now, at the beginning of September, is still needing to be settled. The FDA is still looking at that and deciding whether or not booster shots are going to be offered and to whom and when. And so we don't have the science on that settled as yet. But I still want to at least make sure that people understand that's an issue for people that have been vaccinated for 6 to 8 months already. That's not an issue for those that have not yet been vaccinated and are concerned about where the Delta variant is, especially in those states right now where Delta is raging. So I just wanted to leave that as a general point and as really the motivation for me, and I'm sure for many others, in making these kinds of videos so people can understand that.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and all the information today and throughout this pandemic. Thank you for empowering people to better understand the data and the science of this pandemic, and also ways that they can optimize their own health and immunity. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in for this discussion and made it to the end here. If you enjoyed this discussion or found it useful, please share it with friends and family. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Dr. Patrick's YouTube channel, Found My Fitness. Visit her website, find her on social media, and visit us at medcram.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on social media as well. And please also leave comments and feedback about this discussion. We really appreciate reading through those and get ideas for future videos to do and future interviews to have. So thanks again, and we hope to see you all soon. Be safe.